Welcome to Round Glass. My name is Santi Wang, and it's my greatest pleasure to be here to guide you in meditation today. Today, we're going to explore the topic of emptiness of self. It is a deeper practice. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is one of the most pinnacle practice of wisdom. And I'd like for us to apply this concept of emptiness to ourself. And so when I say emptiness, what I mean is that things lack a self-existent nature. I'll give you an example. Chocolate ice cream. If chocolate ice cream was inherently delicious from its own side as an object, radiating out towards you, anyone who would then taste chocolate ice cream would always have the same reaction, that it's good, that it's delicious. But the fact is that we know that people have other preferences. Some people don't like chocolate ice cream. Some people like a different flavor. And say if you ate a gallon of chocolate ice cream, would you still have that same feeling that it's good, it's delicious from its own side, self-existently? Because people have different preferences, because they're projecting a different experience onto the object, that is what we mean by the lack of a self-existent nature that objects hold, that people hold, everything around us. So I'd like to ask you, and feel free to type this into the chat as well as your name and where you're tuning in from, but I'd like to ask you this before we get started. What labels of yourself are you attached to? And what kind of labels do you want to let go of? And when I say labels, I do kind of mean like the labels and the identifiers, these words that we use to try to describe or try to contain the nature of something. And of course, we do have labels or perceptions of ourselves. I may perceive myself as, my name is Santi. I am a Santi. I am from Los Angeles. I live in New York. I have this job as an experiential producer. I'm a woman. I identify as queer. There's so many things, different labels. Maybe today I might feel like I'm kind and generous. Maybe the next day I feel annoyed or irritated. But I want us to sort of call to mind, what sort of labels do we constantly apply to ourselves? And what types of labels do we want to let go of? There's certain labels that maybe we have as a goal to achieve, like CEO one day, president. And then there's certain labels that we want to get rid of. Oh, I don't want to be associated with that. I'm not just limited to that thing that you say, that word. And so I want us to kind of look at these labels as something that doesn't quite fully, completely define who you are. They're sometimes a limitation. And sometimes there's something that we're attached to, whether we're aware of it or not. So I want to go to some of your responses. Elizabeth wants to let go of the label perfectionist. I know that very well, Elizabeth, because with perfectionist also comes my failure complex. So I definitely love to work with that today. Jackie wants to let go of introvert. I love that, Jackie. Same, introvert or extrovert. Again, it's great that you're identifying what these things are that you want to release, that you want to go beyond. And as we do this practice, I want us to work on starting to identify these labels that we think we are or that we see ourselves as being. And by identifying it, we can then work with it to try to neutralize, to try to destroy the labels, to try to tap into the emptiness of ourself, which purely means our infinite potential, for us to not be stuck with these labels and identifiers and just being that. And the other thing I'd like for us to explore is just simply being. I feel often that I'm so accustomed to doing, and that I don't quite know what it's like to just be, to just experience the sense of being, existing, without any of those labels. So I'd like you to try, and you're going to get into a funny place. It might feel funny at first, where you have this habit of wanting to grasp to something, to find a foothold, to know what you are, because that's what we're habituated to do. We're habituated to holding on to these things to identify ourselves, to define ourselves in this world and to others and to ourselves. And so I want to practice letting go of that and just trying to discover this simple yet profound state of being beyond any of those labels. Hope that sounds good to you too. So let's get started by getting into our meditative posture. If you're seated on the ground, try to elevate the hips slightly above the knees. And if you're seated at a chair, try to scoot a little forward to have both feet firmly planted to the ground. If you have any lower back issues, then definitely scoot back. Feel that support for your lower back. And in whatever seated posture you're in, feel free to just let the hands rest on your lap. And the most important part is to have a straight spine. So just imagine growing from the seat all the way up through the crown of the head. And you can close your eyes. And let's just roll our shoulders up to our ears and back just to open up the chest, open up the heart. And we'll first start with some nice deep breaths. So starting to inhale through the nose for a count of 4, holding at the top for 4, and then exhaling through the nose for another count of 4, holding at the bottom for 4. And feel free to do 3 more rounds of these deep breaths at your own pace. Giving ourselves this time to just connect with our breath, connecting with our body, using the breath to help us come to this present moment. And when you're done, you can just let the breath naturally flow, just settling in. And as you settle in, just allow any sounds that you hear in your environment just to take a mental note, but returning back to the breath, drawing our focus back to the breath. Settling in, just noticing the temperature of the room. And we'll start with a quick body scan just to relax into our posture. Starting with the crown of the head, just start to relax the forehead and the eyebrows, the eyelids, the jaw and the mouth. Relaxing the neck and shoulders. Imagining any tension just streaming out from the upper arms down through the forearms and out through the hands. And while keeping the spine straight, starting to scan down the back, imagining every muscle and tendon relaxing around the bones. Relaxing the seat, the inner and outer thighs, the calves and the shins. Finally, the soles of the feet and each and every toe. If you still notice any areas of tension in the body, you can take a moment to inhale to create space in that area. And as you exhale, let the tension ride out with the breath. Just trusting our bodies to relax. Keeping our bodies still in our meditative posture. And feel free at any point during your practice to always return to the breath. Let that serve as your anchor point. If you get too distracted or feel a little too dull, come back to the breath. And we'll first start by visualizing yourself. Bring up the image of yourself in your mind. And you can imagine yourself in any sort of setting. Really try to look at the details of how you appear. And as you see yourself, see what types of labels of your identity come up. And again, we're just bringing up these labels without needing to criticize or judge them. We're just simply acknowledging them, simply naming them. And just know there's no wrong way or right way, just seeing what labels come up. And with some of these labels, start to analyze and see what sort of meaning you are projecting onto the label and how that defines you. What types of things do these labels either gain or lose for you? Just simply noticing what types of relationship of meaning that we have with these labels we hold. And next, now consider if you are only the collection of all of these labels. If you are only the collection of these labels, if one was removed, would you stop being you? Perhaps you might notice that if one is just simply removed, then you aren't completely all of the collection. You are neither a single label nor the collection of those labels. And consider if you were only one of those labels, if someone were to encounter that quality, that label, would they know it was you specifically? Now consider that these labels, whether it's the collection of everything that you had acknowledged or just one singular one, that they are not actually you, that they actually do not define you, both your physical form as well as your mental form. Try to notice any sort of feelings that may come up with that insight. And now start to dissolve those labels. Dissolve your identity. Let go of your name. Let go of the labels. And again, as you're visualizing this, you can imagine whether it is your name or these words or even your physical form that starts to dissolve. But slowly go through one by one, dissolving all of the labels that you had earlier acknowledged. Dissolving as much as you can any trace of any sort of identity that you held. Dissolving both the physical and mental projections of self, of me. Try to rest in that space of not having to grasp to anything. We're working with our habit of having to grasp or be attached to these labels. But what happens if we just let go for a moment? Just letting go of having to do anything. Just resting in that simple yet profound space of simply being. Simply being and simply accepting ourselves in our ineffable entirety, in our profound potential. Acknowledge that this is truly who you are. And try to maintain this mental posture through the rest of your day, acknowledging this divine nature that you have just by simply being, beyond any label. As we wind down our practice, take a moment to dedicate any of your insights, anything that you've gained, to someone you really care about who could really benefit from your practice. Give it to them like a gift. And lastly, feel joy for making every effort in your practice today. And feel free to bring a little smile to the edges of your mouth as that expression of joy. And while taking your time, slowly coming out, feel free to take anything that you need, whether it's some nice deep breaths, some nice gentle movements in the hands or toes. But at your own time, can slowly come out. Thank you for practicing with me today. Before we end, I wanted to invite you to ask any questions or comments that you have from your practice. It was a deep practice, so it's okay if there are questions. But to get us started, some commonly asked questions that I get in this practice is what to do when you have trouble dissolving your identity or letting go of that. And it will, don't feel the pressure or be hard on yourself if it was difficult for you. It is a very difficult thing to initially practice. And what I've noticed by doing this practice is that I'm acknowledging what a habit I have into these labels that I have of myself, like perfectionist or introvert or anxious or not perfect, not good enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough. Or sometimes it could be these great labels, but then it may inflate my ego and pride. And maybe too much of that isn't great. So it's just this practice of playing and seeing what is it like to let go of that label. Because we're so used to it. What if we didn't have it? It's hard to explain and describe. I wish I could do it better justice. But that's the place where we want to play. Just almost imagining even like, letting go of my name, letting go of these labels that I have for myself, even letting go of like what I think my hand and fingers are. And that's why I was trying to move us through, are you the collection of all of those things or only one? Because if you took one of the parts of the collection out, do you cease to ever exist? No, you're still there. Okay, so are you just only one of those things? No, you're not. So it's helping us to sort of like triangulate this space of seeing that we don't have this self-existent nature, that we are beyond that. We actually have so much profound potential. So I hope that helps. Nikki wants to know what to say to others who try to label us. I always try to notice my first reaction, which is just the habit that I have. And then I really think about how I want to respond. And, in my response, it's also the thing that I want to grow more of. And maybe that's compassion and love or kindness. And maybe I can use it as a teaching moment of, I know you see me as this thing, but I'm not just this monolithic label or name. I'm not the stereotype. I'm not what that thing just limits me to be. I am more than that. In the same way, do you see yourself as only just that label? Or do you feel like there is more to you? Because there is more to us. We all have so many complexities, but I think the thing is that don't get stuck in the label. Don't get limited in the thing. Of course, we use words to describe things. It functions. But we can't see people as stuck as that. We can't even see ourselves stuck as that because we'll never grow. So use it to grow. Another question, how can I separate myself from the labels I'm so used to carrying around? I mean, this practice is super helpful, but it's this habit that we have of seeing ourselves in a certain way. And it's just noticing, well, what am I beyond that? What am I if I wasn't that? Because it's a perception of our mind. And whether we give it more credence to be valid or not is really coming from our own minds. And so it's sort of a trick. It's like, well, does it have to be that way? Could it be something else? Could it be beyond that? And so try even, breaking that habit. Instead of saying, I'm constantly a perfectionist, I'm afraid to fail, I can't do that, maybe think of it in terms of, you know what, it's okay. I can learn from everything around me. There isn't this sort of constricted confine of the way the world works where it's either perfect or it's not. It can just be what it is, and what it is could just be truly beautiful, and we can appreciate that. And also with seeing ourselves as an introvert, we don't have to limit ourselves to seeing that we are afraid to open up, and that's a bad thing. Maybe it's just acknowledging that we're at a certain state and we have the capacity to nurture the ability to be more open and to share more of ourselves. So I hope all those things help. As we wind down, I just wanted to say thank you so much for making it to your cushion today and for practicing with me. If you want to keep in touch and keep joining these classes, feel free to follow my profile. You can also catch all the other pre-recorded sessions with me. And with that, I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.